Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lily Wang. I'm the CEO Manager at SPARC, a Center for Social Research Innovation. Welcome to today's SPARC Talk, Research Creation as Responsive Design with Julia Brook and Colleen Renihan. I'd like this to begin by giving honor and thanks to the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations as the traditional inhabitants of the land where McMaster stands. To say that is to acknowledge a debt to those who were here before us and to recognize our responsibility as guests to respect and honor the intimate relationship Indigenous peoples have to this land. I'd like to start with some introductions. Dr. Colleen Renihan is the Associate Professor at the Dance School of Drama and Music at Queen's University. Her research examines issues of temporality, voice, and memory in music theater. Dr. Julia Brook is Associate Professor and Director of the Dance School of Drama and Music at Queen's University. Her research examines the intersections between community context and teaching and learning in the arts. Together, Drs. Brook and Renehan run a research team that examines well-being, creativity, and healthy aging through Rise, Shine, Sing, a weekly music and movement program they design and facilitate. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Lily, for the warm welcome. And thank you to Lynn and to Allison for inviting us here and for all your help today. It's a real pleasure for Colleen and I to join you today and to talk a little bit about our research creation project, our flagstone program, Rise, Shine, Sing, and hopefully you can learn a little bit more about through our explanation of our research and our findings, how this kind of structure could work in other contexts. And we'd be happy to discuss a little bit more at the end of the talk. Also, I'd like to acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on the traditional lands, also on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee people, and we are grateful to live and work here as we work on a path, our journey on a path of reconciliation. Colleen is joining us from Vancouver, and do you just want to introduce yourself a little bit, Colleen, and then we'll get into things.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, everyone. It's really nice to be with you virtually. So I am joining you from Vancouver, the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And yeah, really, again, happy to be joining you in this Zoom space. And Julia, I wondered if you would mind sharing your screen, if that works.
Yeah, I'm going to share the presentation here. So as Lily mentioned, this is, Colleen and I work together on a SSHRC-funded research project that examines accessible and inclusive music theater. So we want to look at ways that we can create opportunities for people who maybe don't feel like they can access some community or professional activities in terms of singing and dancing, how we can create opportunities for them, and also to explore what the outcome is of those opportunities. So I'm grateful for the funding provided by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, and as well as the Canadian Foundation for Innovation. Over to you, Colleen. You're muted.
Great. There we go. So this research would also not be possible without a great team of investigators, facilitators, collaborators, postdoc, fellows, research associates, and research and technical assistants, many of whom you see on your screen. We are up in the top left corner there. We also work very closely with Amy Booth, who is a physiotherapist and dance educator locally, who has experience in working with folks living with Parkinson's specifically. So we work closely with her to help design the program. We've also begun a collaboration this year with the two researchers in the middle of the top row there, Catherine Donnelly and Vince DePaul, and we'll tell you a little bit about that new collaboration, our colleagues in rehab therapy. And then, a whole team of research assistants, of students who, as we'll discuss through this program, we're hoping to train in this kind of work in the hopes that, these students will go out and imagine other ways to hopefully continue some of these things in their future work. So we are in year 3 of what is a multi-year program. So we're going to tell you throughout this presentation about some of the things, some of the findings and our processes throughout all 3 years of the program. Actually, before we go on, I just mentioned at the end of the first top row there, you'll see 2 of our collaborators, Elizabeth McDonald and Catherine Smithram, who are also members of our program. So we've been working and writing with them as well through this process.
So our overarching research, we have 3 overarching research questions for this project. One is about singing and dancing or music theater. So we use the term singing plus. So singing is our anchor art form, and then we incorporate other elements with it, mainly dancing, which Amy leads in our program. And then we also add other theatrical elements, costumes, story. So what we want to know through this research project is how can the experiences of the people in our program who maybe aren't part of the literature, how can they inform the genre? So we want to know a little bit about that. We also want to know a little bit about how and why and what's the outcome of these experiences for our participants. So how are their lives enhanced, if at all? We use the PERMA well-being model to examine those features and those outcomes, mostly in a qualitative way with some descriptive statistics. And then also, how do we support the learning of facilitators? So one of our understandings is that we know that the arts have many benefits to them, but we also know that they're not readily available. So one of the ways that we can make them more readily available is to create more facilitators who feel comfortable reaching out and adapting their art form to other audiences. So we wanted to think about how our learning as facilitators changed, and also that of our students as they're engaging in the program.
Okay, so Reihan Singh was established in February of 2020, and we all know what comes next, but I'll save that secret for a moment now. We were initially, though, interested in researching some of the benefits of music theater, as Julia mentioned, for communities typically excluded from the genre, ways to make this kind of activity more accessible for more people, specifically for older adults, and ways to explore the integration of song and dance and costume and story, all these components of music theater in different ways. So on the left, you can see the image of our in-person gathering, which happened only for 3 weeks before the pandemic hit, of course. And at that time, it was open to anyone who could attend. And it was primarily attended by older adults in our community. But we also had, a mother who was on maternity leave who came with her baby, a couple of other community members who just had time on Monday mornings to join us. And it was wonderful for 3 weeks. And then, of course, the pandemic hit and we stopped. And we decided after a time, we had to make a decision, about whether or not to pivot online. And we've come a long way in the 3 years since that time. But at the time, it was really, we were hoping, of course, that this was going to be sort of a stopgap measure for a short amount of time and that we would come back to in-person. And what we discovered was something quite wonderful. And that was that despite the fact that, most folks in music and theater, as you may know, sort of really struggled through that time to move to translate in-person performance to online offering, we really found that it had some benefits. But in order to make that happen, we had to mute all our participants so we could no longer hear anyone sing. And of course, we had to deal with things like the Zoom, delay and all of those kinds of problems with latency, which became really obvious very quickly for us. But anyway, we're excited to tell you also about how that transformed. Most of our participants over the 3 years have been between the ages of 50 to 75. Most are retired. Most live in Eastern Ontario, which includes some of the rural areas in the region. Some are from Toronto and Southwestern Ontario. And this year we have had several people join. Our program has grown a lot this year, even though it's offered online. And folks join us from Saskatchewan, BC, the US. We have some folks from the UK and from South America as well. And the folks who join, their singing and dancing abilities vary pretty broadly. We have some who are like professional singers and dancers in their previous lives. And then some who are, true beginners. And so that's, sort of interesting that we have this real range of skill and ability and interest in the various art forms. Again, this year we started a collaboration with our colleagues in rehab therapy, Catherine Donnelly and Vince DePaul at Queen's, who run an aging in place program here in the city called, actually across the country now, called Oasis, in which they have several sites there through which they're exploring aging in place. And so we've been offering our Reihan Sing program through these sites. And what happens is that it's effectively a kind of hybrid offering. So we have people who join in person in condo buildings or apartment buildings. In Kingston, currently, we have 3 of those sites. And then they together experience the virtual program, which is projected over like a television or a big screen on the wall at each of their sites. And those sites are facilitated by some of our research assistants on our team. So now we're going to show you a short video. It's about 2 minutes, just to give you, it's sort of like a trailer for the program so you can get a sense of what it feels like. And this video is narrated by 2 of our collaborators.
Every Monday morning, you could rise, shine, and sing. If you're looking for a bright, creative way to start your week, you could join in online.
Rise, Shine, Sing is a free, live, weekly singing and dancing and movement program. It was launched in 2020 by 2 Queen's researchers in music, Colleen Renihan and Brook. They have designed the program to welcome and enable people of all abilities to join in, singing and dancing to musical theater, folk, and pop songs, all from the comfort of their own home.
This is how it works. Everyone is muted, so you can sing your heart out. The Rise, Shine, Sing team shares the words online and teaches you the songs and dance movements. That fun 45 minutes together can bring energy and joy into your day. Each session begins with a warm-up. The team shares tips to help you move your body and enhance your breathing and your voice. Amy Booth, the program's dance educator and physiotherapist, creates dance movement that can be done standing or sitting. There's lots of choice to help you find ways to move that work for you. Each of us, as a participant, has a prop box with ribbons, balls, scarves, even a top hat for inspiration. We sing songs like Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from Oklahoma, Happy by Pharrell Williams, and Louis Armstrong's What a Wonderful World. Each session ends with an energetic dance out, where we wave goodbye and get sent into our weeks with a skip in our step. Come sing and dance with us. You can join the program from wherever you are. We have members from across Canada, the US, and England. Register online at riseshinesing.ca and join the fun.
Great, so that's a bit of an overview of the program. Thanks so much, Evan, for the feedback. This is a short slide just to talk a little bit more about those prop boxes that Catherine and Elizabeth were talking about. So that's what they look like. We would mail them out to all of our participants. The ones in our hybrid locations, we would send them prop box bags, and some of them keep them in their common room. Some of them take them to their apartments and then bring them back down with them. And then when we send out a newsletter every week to give people the link, which is the same, but just to remind them of the link and give them the list of songs, we'll also tell them which props we'll be using and incorporating in the various songs. On the other slide, you see some pictures and the word glow, and that is an example of some of our Create projects. So at the beginning, in the first couple of years, we would have these kind of extracurricular projects outside of the regular week. And we would have a song that we would learn together, but then we would want to create a video together. And this one was based on the choral song by Eric Whitaker called Glow. And we did this, I think, 20 to 21, when it was like the first big year of the pandemic, and we were all really, it was a dreary winter. So we decided we were going to look for light. And so we asked our participants to take pictures of light that they saw around them, and we learned to sing the song Glow. And we invited participants to join us individually on a Zoom call and to record themselves singing. And so we put together this video, and we would have layer over all their pictures of light. So those are examples of some of the pictures that our participants shared with us on light. And it was a really lovely group experience for us to make this creative product. And then the prop box was a way that we were incorporating various creative elements within the song, so we could create our own stories and use various theatrical elements within the session. In terms of the literature, so as Colleen mentioned before, like one of our goals was to figure out different structures, and we think of this as being very interdisciplinary when we think about working with older adults, when we think about the genre. So we were looking for literature. We did a scoping review looking for literature on older adults, and then the integration of singing with another art form. And interestingly, what we found was the literature was kind of sparse. We also saw it in multidisciplines. So we saw it in aging journals, we saw it in music journals, we saw it in gerontology journals, we saw it in like anthropology or ethnomusicology journals, but we didn't see an interdisciplinary experience. So we didn't see people citing each other. We also didn't see a lot of depth in terms of the literature. So we didn't see a number of researchers who had maybe spent some time really exploring these kinds of things. Many of them were still in the pilot phase. We also found that there wasn't necessarily a really explicit link between these theories or these kinds of research and then what practitioners can do. So we saw a hole there. And then we also saw a hole in our understanding of what older adulthood is and could be, and what are the needs of people across that, what we call the third age. So what is it between post-work and the end of one's life, and where do music and dance fit with all of that, and how do we even think about individuals who are in their retirement phase or in their post-work or in their work phase but are over the age of 50 or 60, which feels closer every year, but so that's what we wanted to know, and that's kind of where we're sitting in the literature to try to inform all of these different things.
Okay, so research creation is something that we came upon because, and really sort of foregrounded from the very beginning, even in the in-person offerings, but also as we moved into virtual. And, of course, its values, research creation is inherently interdisciplinary. It values not knowing, like a sort of emergence of thinking and of research design as a given project progresses or unfolds. It's about creating the thing that you want to investigate, about generating versus representing or collecting data. And it also unsettles inherent power relations and modes of research production, which is something that we felt really strongly about because we wanted to include our members and our research participants in the design of the thing that ultimately we wanted to create and then explore. And it of course implicates the researcher in the event of research as well. And so that's important to know, is that Julia and I both are involved in the weekly running of the session. So Julia plays piano, I lead the singing, and Amy leads the dancing and movement. And our research assistants also are involved in, singing, dancing, creating, facilitating on a weekly basis, in addition to, analysis and, the typical kind of research activities that we would associate with research. And Julia, if I could ask you to just skip a slide. There we go. Yeah. And so for us, this seemed appropriate for reasons that are probably obvious. We wanted to collaborate with researchers across disciplines to address this sort of wicked problem of supporting well-being and creativity for older adults. We wanted to be able to be responsive to our participants, in the in-person offering, also virtually, but also through the pandemic. This became even more important because, of course, we were exploring what Zoom could offer as a platform for this work. And so we were playing with it, and we continue each week, in fact, to make tweaks to the songs, to the way in which we're using Zoom. We've changed that over time, and really kind of the research creation frame has allowed us to make those changes and to make that kind of creative responsiveness part of the research design itself. From a musical and performing arts perspective, the musical product was less important than the process. And this is also like inherent to research creation itself, in that, you know, in music and performing arts, we tend to place traditionally a lot of focus on the final performance, or, you know, a kind of polished product. And we were less interested in that. Of course, we can't even hear our participants now, we can see them. But it's less about creating an official final performance that's polished than in the process itself of having fun and of creating something together for ourselves. And finally, we felt responsible to contribute actively to the community. So we wanted to do something that that could be useful to folks. And so the creation of a program, a community program, while it has its challenges, because it is a lot of heavy lifting in the sort of facilitation side of things, really does allow us to feel as though, you know, we're working with our participants to create something that's of use to them. So it's never us imposing something on them. It's us being able to sort of respond to their feedback, to the ways in which they're engaging or not engaging with the program, so that we can create something that's of use to the people in our communities.
And I'll just add one more thing there is, and when Colleen and I were coming up with the design for this, we did talk about whether or not we should seek out community facilitators and partner with them. And ultimately we decided we should take the biggest risk as university researchers, and that we really wanted to push the boundaries on the genre. We really wanted to dig into process, and especially with the pandemic, switching to virtual, we didn't think it was fair, because we were such active researchers, to, in a sense, ask a community facilitator to lead the singing in the way that we wanted them to. And we thought we would best do that, look at the structure on our own, take responsibility if it was a flop for that, because that would in and of itself be a research finding to know what didn't work as well. So we invited Amy to come along, knowing that we would take full responsibility for all of the things that we were doing wrong as we explored these parameters. So that was something we wanted to be active to the community. But we also recognized our role as researchers, having this privilege to be able to take risks and to fail without it affecting our salary, which isn't a privilege that a lot of our community artists have. So while we are very flexible in the terms of the program, and we want to be responsive to the program, we collect data in a very straightforward way. So we record each of the Zoom sessions, and our research assistants who are in person, they do reflections at the end of each of the sessions, so that we can observe or document the types of participation of each of our participants. So whether or not they've turned their video on, if they're sitting, if they're dancing, if they look like they're singing or dancing or how they seem to engage with each of the different activities. We also send out questionnaires to our participants twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring, to get a sense of their feedback on the program. Also, we ask them questions specific to perma well-being, about feelings of positivity, engagement, meaning, relationships, and accomplishment. We'll share some of those findings with you today. We interviewed our participants at the end of the second year, as we were trying to really understand the pandemic. And then we also did focus groups this past November with our in-person people to understand what that hybrid experience was like. And then we have debrief meetings with our team just to think about the program. And that's where we record those and just talk about how we nuance the program in terms of pacing, in terms of repertoire selection, in terms of those kinds of structures. Findings. So this is me, the virtual environment. So as we've mentioned, what was really interesting to us, which was counter, I think, a lot of narratives, is when we did focus groups, or we did a questionnaire last spring, and we said, you know, what's next for Reihan Singh? And a lot of people said it was the virtual environment to them That was the selling feature, and they wanted to stay virtual. They wouldn't come to an in-person activity. For many of them, it just alleviates those time and place barriers. Even our local people who live in rural and remote areas, to come for a 45-minute program or an hour program, but it takes an hour and a half to get there each way, was a barrier for them, especially if they needed to come to Kingston for medical appointments and other days. Just another trip into town was something that wasn't possible for them. We also found that when we muted the singing, it provided a newfound freedom for many of the participants. So this idea of them being able to control how much they share. So if they don't want to turn on their screen, that's totally fine. If they don't want anyone to see them or hear them, but they want to be part of the group and they want to experience it, we found that that was a newfound freedom for many of our participants, and they liked having that kind of control. And we've also noticed some of our RAs have commented, because they watch the videos of certain people over the course of a season, or for some of our RAs for multiple seasons. They've commented on how some of the people they've watched, how they've changed or how they've started to share more. So someone may start with their video off, and then eventually they turn their video on, but they're seated, and then maybe they're standing more. They're starting to share more of their body with the group. So we're starting to see that them having this kind of choice is something that is very empowering and welcomes them into the participation. And as Colleen mentioned, we have this wide variety of people's abilities, and which has been really interesting, both in not being able to hear what somebody else sounds like. So everybody sounds like Colleen, who leads the singing, which is really lovely, or they sound like themselves. But you don't have to compare yourself to the other people in the group. So a lot of the literature about group singing has talked about this blend and this sharing of singing, but we also hear stories about how directors have unfortunately told people not to sing, or people have feel shame, they don't want to share their voice with others. So this allows that kind of alleviation. We have some people too, and also the combining of singing and dancing provides multiple challenge points. So these people of different abilities are coming and they're able to challenge themselves in unique ways. And we've found that by combining the singing and dancing, it creates multiple entry points and multiple challenge points, which we find really interesting in terms of the way that participants are able to customize the environment and customize their goals for themselves.
Great. So just to continue on with this first research questions about transforming the parameters of musicking. So yeah, as Julia mentioned, it really does, this singing while muted over Zoom really does challenge the traditional frameworks of the source of community and togetherness in group singing, because the literature is like just replete with, people writing about ways that singing together is about a unified sound, and feelings of togetherness and community come from that, the sound of singing together. And what we're finding is, from a sort of a musical perspective, is that people are singing their hearts out. We can see that. We've been, analyzing what it looks like, what singing looks like, right? And different kinds of singing look like. And again, of course, that shifts depending on our participants and their abilities and where they're at, but they really do sing their hearts out, and that they do amazingly feel connected and a part of a community, even though they can't hear other people. They can see other people through the screen. So that's sort of the first 2 points there. We talk about in our program about imagining sound and connection through screen. So we do work with the Zoom screen in terms of coming close up to the screen. We work with touch, which was something interesting, of course, during the pandemic, something that we were all kind of craving. And there's no judgment, and that's something that comes up in a lot of our questionnaires and our interviews, is that people feel really free to express themselves because they feel like they won't be judged, which tells us also a lot about traditional musicking, perhaps communities or opportunities, and the ways that lots of people feel excluded from them for various reasons, for voices or bodies who sing or move differently, and this is offering what as we're finding a kind of a new way in. In the interest of time, I'm going to pass it on to Julia to move ahead. I think we're
Great. And these next few slides just show some of the questionnaire findings. This is from the past fall, but it's pretty indicative of what we've been seeing all along. So feelings of positivity. So certainly this tells you how positive do you feel at the end of the session. So they rated that on 1 to 5. So they feel extremely positive during the session. And then how long do those levels of positivity last? For many of them, it lasts the middle one there, it lasts for the rest of the day. So they've all talked about how the Monday morning time slot is really good for them. For some people, it's a lot to get up for, but for some, that's a great goal to have met first thing in the morning. And we try really hard throughout Reihan Sing is people really like positive songs. So we try very hard to uplift, and we've had that as an explicit theme. And so we're really heartened that our participants have shared that they feel very positive through the experience, and then that feeling lasts beyond the session.
Is this me, Julia?
This is you.
Okay, great. Sorry.
Relationships.
Okay, great. So yeah, I mean, this is just following the PERMA model. Some of the things we ask about are ways that people engage in the program. So you can, this is fairly tiny. I apologize for this. It's very small font. This is not very accessible, is it? In any case, I engage in Reihan Sing through, so singing, dancing, participating in the trivia and coffee time, a variety of different things like resources on the website, reading the newsletter. We do a goodbye dance out every week. And it's just interesting to us that folks are selecting several, ways that they engage, and that the program offers various ways to engage, so that people do feel engaged because they have a variety of ways to do that. And we talk about that explicitly as we're sort of facilitating the program each week. I think there might be another slide with this.
Yeah, and I just will say the coffee time is we do open the call before the singing starts just to have chit chat with everyone. And we do have trivia just leading into that so that we can have some conversation starters for people. This is yours too, Colleen.
Okay, great. So this is just how much do you agree? Why do you attend Reihan Sing? And you can see on the right there the sort of legend to provide structure in the day, to be part of the group, to add variety, to see friends and family, and just it's just a real range of responses, and many agree to several of them. So yeah, I mean, I just think that sort of speaks for itself that there are a bunch of reasons why people would join this group, and it doesn't have to be the same reason for everyone. People join for different reasons, and they don't have to be great singers or dancers, sort of traditionally speaking, or in order to take part.
These are just some quotes just to highlight some of the ways that they engage or they feel how they feel inside of that. And some of them also join. Some of our participants invite other friends in different locations. So we do see, there's not very many of them, but we do see some people who have invited friends who live in different locations. Some have also invited family members. So we see those kinds of connections there. And those are some quotes too, just about their connection with the sound and the experience. So this relates to the idea of meaning too, and what the meaning that the songs have for the participants. So this one participant wrote about a lot of songs. So we sing songs like Moon River, California Dreamin', Four Strong Winds. So these golden oldies or these favorites from the 50s, 60s, 70s, folk, pop, rock, musical theater. So many of the participants tell us about their own memories or their own experiences with the song, or that they just like the song from different parts of their lives. We also are trying to figure out how we introduce new songs. So this goes back to this Glow project that we had that ended up being, the song was something that was a song that no one knew. And we practiced it for a couple of weeks, and then they signed up. And this person talked about how they challenged themselves to sing and how much of an accomplishment they felt like when they signed up for the recording session and sang, which is also different than what we had this fall. So we introduced we did a lot of musical theater songs, but we did like Tangled, and we did something from The Greatest Showman. And we got feedback from participants like, please go back to the regular songs and the old songs, so that I think this meaning of the song is also really carefully chosen, the songs, and peppering new ideas or new songs very sparsely with things that they're already very familiar with. Over to you, Colleen.
Great. Yeah, and just quickly, because I would love to move on to the final two slides. how the folks rate their feelings of accomplishment. So folks feel as though they have really accomplished something by the end of the session, which is really important, of course, to healthy aging in place, all of these things we're finding, and that people feel really good about themselves, about having done something. The level of challenge is something else. I don't know if we have that slide in this particular presentation, but anyways, I'll just speak to it, that we ask about how, is the level of challenge right? Is the singing too hard? Is the dancing too hard? Is combining the two, how does that level feel to you? Is it just right? And most feel it's just about right, which is really interesting to us. It's not always that way. And I think it depends on the song. We always have to watch for that. But I think because there are so many multiple entry points and ways for folks to manage the program and to accommodate their own abilities and interests, that they do end up finding that the level is about right for them. So was it a really exciting finding for us? Yeah. And I think we can move through this just in the interest of time. Yeah.
Okay. Challenges. So this is you, Colleen.
Great. Okay. So, one of the things that we were hoping in this presentation today was to, speak with you about things that might cross our disciplinary, boundaries, and some things that might be shared. So, there's so many things that have been amazing and great and wonderful about this program, and we have a great time working on it together. But it's tricky for many reasons. One is this kind of program is really heavy on the facilitation side. So we have, one of the challenges for us is balancing this time of running the program and then dealing with all of the data and writing up our findings, of course. I'm sure many of you can, share our pain in that. I know it's not just us, but that's a real struggle for us. The second, do you want to speak to the second point, Julia?
Sure. The other was, this is our kind of our pedagogy background is, as I'm sure you all know, if you taught virtually online, is you don't get the same kind of feedback. And so it was always really tricky for us to figure out pacing. And people could say thumbs up or thumbs down, but you couldn't really tell how the pacing of the learning was going. And so we had to think of a lot more prep now, because we couldn't necessarily pivot within the session. You had to have everything and the possible parameters ready to go before the session. And we had to think about pacing in between sessions. So I think it's just, as a teacher, it's a lot more time to prep and reflect. But the teaching time itself is very fixed, and that format is very fixed. So that's just an interesting challenge in terms of pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
Interdisciplinary goes back to kind of our literature and this idea of collaborating and discussing with people across disciplines and dissemination, is that we all care about the arts. We all talk about the arts slightly differently. We all talk about people slightly differently. And so the collaboration has been very rich, but the learning curve is steep, I would say, to get us all on the same page. We also have a funny story about trying to get our scoping review published, and we've heard it's not aging enough, not community enough, not music enough, not education enough. Sorry. So it is kind of, in some ways, this in-between space. So I think it is us figuring out how to really ground ourselves and find people who can, taking the time to find the common language. And then sustainability. Sustainability of the program. I think for us, we'll apply for another grant and things like that, but I think with all of these challenges, trying to figure out how to be sustainable, one of the things that a lot of people appreciate about the program is it is free of charge too. And so how do we create the infrastructure within a university environment? Because we do feel like it's meeting important needs for many of our participants, and we feel responsible to continue to have this kind of offering. So just thinking about the structures that are needed to sustain that. And our learnings, this is our final slide. Just to say some of our learnings and that we want to continue to explore is this nuanced understanding of the third age. And it was really funny because we had this meeting with our collaborators, and we're going to co-write together. And one of we had a list of topics around singing and dancing and virtual, and they were like, and then we want to talk about what it means to be an older adult. And then they went on for like 10 minutes to talk about what it means to be the ages that they are, and also their understanding or perception, how that's changed also as they've aged. So that's a really interesting thing for us. And a lot of people have told us we're doing therapy because we're working with older adults. When we are not doing therapy, we are doing leisure or education for people of varying abilities. Some of our folks do live with chronic disease, but this is not therapy for them. This is a leisure activity that we want to make them able to participate in. We also have learnings around what it means to be live and what it means to be virtual in terms of connecting, in terms of social relationships, in terms of the act of musicking. And what is this idea of, as people who, Colleen and I are both, our education is steeped in music, and music is very much about shared sound. So we were having this experience without shared sound. So it's been really interesting for us to think about what that means for group singing and for group genre. That's it. Thanks so much for listening, and we look forward to.
Thank you.
I'll stop my share here.
Thank you so much for the talk. Do we have any questions? Are you taking questions?
Yes, sure.
Yes, that's our question.
Yeah.
Of course. More comments?
Oh, I think we can't hear you.
Danica, we can't hear.
Oh, Danica, I think you're muted. No.
Do you
You
want
can
to
type it.
You want to type it?
I have a question. Can I participate? It sounds so fun.
Totally can.
Totally can.
Anyone can join.
You sign up on our website.
Cool. Do you have a link?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll put that in the chat. Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's riseshinesing.ca for the recording. Yeah. And then you can see there's a tab that says join RSS, I believe.
And we
That's
go
wonderful.
until the end of April, and then we should start the Monday after Thanksgiving, and we end the end of April with a little bit of a break around the holidays in December.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Yeah. Looking for Danica's message.
Oh. Isaac and I are
Yes.
RDM specialists.
Oh, interesting.
So Danica says, thanks so much for this presentation, ditto. Isaac and I are RDM specialists and think about data documentation and sharing. What are the opportunities for these kinds of things in your project?
I have to admit, I don't know what RDM stands for.
Research data management? I think.
Oh, okay, research data management specialists.
Oh my goodness. We need to think about this. I would love to hear from you about what you think the opportunities are for that within this project.
Would this mic work actually?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, amazing. I'm just using, sorry, I've been having some issues with Zoom for some reason. It's really interesting to talk with you because, yeah, my background is I did a research creation project for my MA as part of my degree at Concordia. And yeah, it's kind of interesting for me coming from a humanities background to think about what data sharing could look like in this context and data documentation. So when you were talking about the way that you were like having these debrief meetings, I was like, that's the kind of form of like unpacking what you're doing as you're doing it kind of thing. So yeah, I think there are some issues with sharing qualitative data just because it's so specific and often it's really sensitive, but I'm personally kind of excited about the opportunity for like how research kind of extends beyond the project itself. And there's opportunities for sharing things like methodologies or, I don't know. I'm just wondering if you thought about it or if you're curious about it or anything like that.
Yeah. So what we haven't been able to delve into because we record all the sessions is how we analyze the people in the recording. So when Colleen was talking about synchrony and co-presence, and also when we think about movement, how do we analyze those data, and how are we going to mine the video data to think about it? So right now our participants watch specific people over the course of the year, and they document those. We use Airtable, so they document those in a database, and then we can look to see, and then they do a summary at the end of each term to document those changes.
Our RAs do, yeah?
Yeah, the RAs
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
we've done a couple of things in terms of, and then when they do their debrief, we actually, they record their debrief in sentence form and we transcribe it. We use AI and transcribe it, and then they just check it to make sure all the words are there. And then we can analyze that. One of the questions I think we'll face as we come up and disseminate it is who's a co-author and who's a participant with our RAs and our co-facilitators. So we're trying to be really cognizant of what are we co-authoring with our undergraduate RAs, and we've had them present findings at undergraduate conferences so that they can take ownership of those ideas. And then when we're using their data or their reflections as part of a triangle of a bigger project, they'll either come on as like third or as a multi-author presentation, and one of us will take the lead for that. Same with our dance facilitator. She's been really helpful in terms of how we think about the research. And we've had to be really thoughtful about where's our division between participant and co-author, and how do we think about those things. Also to say, because we're writing a paper with our collaborators and we're like, would you like to take the lead on this? And they're like, no. And so I know it's something we think a lot about, of like who owns the ideas and the voice, but we also know that that also means that person has to do the heavy lifting of writing the paper. And so I think it's important for us to honor that as well. And then the third thing I'll say, and then Colleen can add, is in our consent form, we tell people when they participate, we're recording the call, and that we won't share their name, but they do have consented for us to share their video. And we do tell them if they don't want, part of the reason people cannot share their video, besides the fact they don't want to, for us to see them, is they also don't want us to record it. And so we totally respect that people can still participate and not share their video, but if they do share their video, to know that we are recording it and we are using it to disseminate our research. So that's kind of how we've thought about the data. We have more data than we've been able to analyze. Yeah. Say that too. It's like a mountain of data, which is really great and a little bit overwhelming sometimes. Colleen?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, yeah, you've mentioned a lot of it. We have a lot of data, and I can imagine that it would be, it would be so interesting to share that, and to be able to share that a lot. I mean, we're bound up with a lot of ethical, considerations, of course, as well. Yeah, but I think that's really interesting, and you've now put that sort of bug in our ear, and we're gonna go away and think more about that, because that is truly fascinating. It's fascinating. Yeah,
it's interesting in this context too, because it's specifically like a performance in some ways too.
Yeah.
Like it's not a performance, and you talked about it like being just kind of for the activity and less about the product. But yeah, interesting to think when you have a mountain of data, how others might approach the same kind of information.
Yeah, and we kind of say it's like small p performance, because it is a performative act, right? But it's not a selling tickets performance. Yeah. What suggestions do you have for us? Or what are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are some repositories that are equipped, like Kim Fortune did a presentation earlier this year, and they have the PECE, which is, or PECE, it's like the platform for, oh my goodness, like collaborative ethnography. And they are equipped specifically, they've built in kind of video players in their repository for data sharing. And I think that's a kind of interesting possibility. It's an open source repository. But yeah, there a lot of the repositories, if it's kind of able to be shared openly and you've gained consent for that, there is some capacity for supporting video sharing. So
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you have a great RDM team at Queen's, so
yes.
they would be able to consult you.
I had a conversation about this with someone a few weeks ago, actually, at Queen's, and I was like, we don't have time to think about that, but it's a really good point.
And it can unfold too, right? Like after you've written the piece, you can still deposit the data then.
Yeah, Evan had a question, maybe.
Thanks, Lily. Thank you so much for the presentation. Echoing Lily, it sounds like a really fun program. And as I was watching the 2-minute clip, I was like, I kind of want to join in. This looks really fun. As somebody who manages a community engaged research program. I'm really interested in this this process of co-creation of research. And you know, I was never trained as an academic in how to do this, so I've kind of been learning as I go along. But something that's really resonated with me and that I think about a lot is that this co-creation process is, in a sense, a sharing of the power in the research process, and often requires us as researchers to give away some of the power in the research process, whether that's, you know, creation of the research questions through the way that data is collected and analyzed. And, you know, for somebody like me who is a bit of a, I like to be able to control a lot of things, it can be very anxiety provoking at some points of the project. I reflect on one partner who we were working with who was responsible for distributing a survey that we created, and they distributed like 3 different drafts of the survey. And then we had to kind of reconcile that and be like, okay, which questions are similar enough that we can put them together? Which ones do we now have to throw out because they're not comparable, etc. But then also we've had some really wonderful collaborations that have allowed us to do research with communities where it might not be appropriate for like I work with a lot of student researchers, people without lived experience, to kind of parachute in and collect information, etc. So I think it's a beautiful idea and can work really well. And I'm still figuring out how to do it. I'm wondering for you, you know, you talked a bit about, you know, like facilitating the online musical theater sessions, and how you made a decision that, you know, it might be best for the 2 of you to actually do the facilitation for various reasons. And you know, I interpreted that as maybe taking back some of the control of the research process, and that's not a critique. I think it's really necessary at times, and it can be appropriate for us to step in and actually do the data collection. But were there other areas where you kind of had to cede control of the process, and what were some of maybe the challenges with that, but maybe what were some of the opportunities or beneficial outcomes as well?
This is a really brilliant question, and thank you for that. And I'm also like super interested in your community-based work as well. I want to know more about that. But yeah, like there's so many parts of the program that we, well, I mean, the repertoire is one thing. Like personally, I love like I would love to be, you know, singing and teaching new things. Like, you know, let's learn a new song. Let's like commission a new piece. And like so many of our participants say, you know, we don't want to do something new. We want something that brings back beautiful memories from the past. So it's like, you know, so we're singing like golden age stuff, which is great. It's really fun. But, you know, so there's things like that, and also our create projects, I'll say, like, even in those, we had ideas of like, you know, doing some really like off the wall kind of things that would be a little bit more sort of like experimental. And like, I love that kind of work, but that's not really what our participants were telling us that they wanted to do. So it was like, if we really want to be responsive and we really want to, you know, like work with these people who are interested in, you know, spending time with us every week, we want to listen to them about what it was that they want to sing and what they want to do. And, you know, so sometimes that's how I feel. Julia, I don't know how you feel about all of that, but that is something that I kind of, you know, it's like, this isn't what I would choose to do, but they all want, like many of them want to do this. So, you know.
I mean, in terms of the participants co-creating, we give them surveys and ask them to give us songs. I think the thing about power is also responsibility. And I think it was really interesting to us when we brought in our collaborators, and they're happy to collaborate with us, but they also, both of them are retired and have done work in academia. They both aren't interested in the responsibility of having to put a paper together or the responsibility of taking these on. And I've noted, and so a lot of our participants will give us feedback, they'll share things with us, they'll give suggestions, but I haven't gotten the sense they're interested in the responsibility and they recognize there's a responsibility in leading and they're not interested in, they have other things on their plate to do, they're very happy to give feedback. And they often, and I mean, people give feedback. Like one of the things we've really struggled with this year is the piano sound and just getting that to go over Zoom. And so they've been very helpful in telling us what, you know, especially around the sound or the challenge. And we got lots of really tactful feedback when we did do more new songs in the fall of, please no, like, and so then we're back to, like, we're singing Jolene on Monday and we're singing a Joni Mitchell song, and they're really lovely, but we know that people want the act of singing and dancing together is enough of a new, that the song has to be something familiar. And in terms of bringing in community partners, I'd love to know more about yours. I think part of it has to do of how established the community partner is. And I think we know for the arts, because everybody's a gig economy, they have to charge, they don't have the stability that maybe a health community partner would have. I don't even know, like, I think the money is so fragile. Their reputation is so tied up in the big P performance for their credibility in the community, that I think we just knew that we couldn't take the risk, recognizing we needed to also maintain their own professional identity. And then that was part of it in that as well. I don't know what your experience is, Evan.
Yeah, no, I resonate a lot with what you said. For context, we're a central unit that takes on volunteer researchers from all faculties, and just as our volunteer pool is diverse, so are our partners, like from every single field, like community education, arts, poverty reduction, health equity, etc. And yeah, I've really noticed the kind of intensity of engagement is very variable, and sometimes feels like it scales with like the capacity of the organization, right? You have some groups that are just strapped so thin and they're like, here's the question, here's what we need to figure out. And I'm like, cool, like, you know, what are some ways that you can be engaged through this process? And they're like, just email me if you need me. I'm like, okay. So like they just kind of want us to take it and do the work, and that's fine, right? That's if you know everybody is coming from a different place and different capacity, and the social sector is stretched really thin. But then there are those partners that have the time or the resources, and it becomes mostly a conversation around to what extent and what are some ways that you want to be engaged in this process, not just the question development. We've worked, you know, directly with organizations for them to hire their own community facilitators to do focus groups for us, and we've only done this a couple of times, but actually done co-analysis of the data as well. So we've worked with an organization and their stakeholders and actually done thematic analysis together. And it turned out super well, because the way that I was thinking about structuring the themes was completely different, and the way that the outcome was just, I think, so much more representative of the data than if we had done it ourselves with our kind of outsider perspective. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but like you also need to be realistic sometimes, and not every organization is going to have the capacity to do that. And you know, we're still a relatively new program, so don't always have the resources or the budget to, you know, the gold standards is paying folks and providing training. We don't always have the capacity to do that. So those are my experiences, but yeah, I really resonate with a lot of your process, both the opportunities and the challenges. So thanks. I mean, that's why I showed up. I was so interested in this process of research creation and seeing it applied in a discipline that I'm quite unfamiliar with, but the same opportunities and challenges seem to keep coming up again and again.
No, thanks for sharing.
Thank you, everyone. I'm just gonna do a wrap up for the video, and then we can end it. So I actually tapped away from the. Give me 1 second. So I just want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. If you have any more questions, please email talktospark@mcmaster.ca. We also have a very simple 1-minute feedback survey that helps us plan for future speakers. That link is in the chat right now. Thank you, Lynn. And if you want to watch this video or any others and see our upcoming events, just visit our website at spark.mcmaster.ca/events. Thank you all for coming today.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.